Virgo, pay attention. Um, Not the casual, half present kind of attention that carries most people through most of their days. The other kind, the kind where you actually stop what you are doing and allow what is being said to land before moving on to the next thing. Because what this reflection is about to walk through is not comfortable. It is not the version of this situation that feels good to hear. It is the version that feels necessary. The version that the part of you that already knows, the part that has been quietly knowing for longer than you have been willing to fully acknowledge, has been waiting for someone to finally say out loud, consider this a warning, not a punishment, not a judgment. A warning, the kind that comes from genuine regard for a person's well being rather than from any desire to diminish what they feel or dismiss what they have built. What you feel for this person is real. That is not in question. But feeling something real does not automatically mean that the situation surrounding it is safe. And right now, in the particular configuration your situation is taken, there are things worth seeing clearly that the feeling may be making it difficult to see. Let's start at the beginning with the text, with the call, with whatever form of contact is sitting at the center of this moment, either already arrived or arriving or expected in a way that has your attention more than you would perhaps like to admit. There is something that happens in the body when contact comes from a person who carries significant emotional weight in your life. Something that bypasses rational assessment entirely and goes straight to the nervous system. A recognition that is faster than thought. A response that is already fully formed before your conscious mind has had time to weigh in. And that response, that immediate, visceral, pre-logical reaction is worth examining carefully. Not to override it, not to dismiss it as merely chemical or merely habitual, but to understand what it is actually telling you, which may be more complicated than it first appears. Because the nervous system responds to the familiar, to what it has learned to anticipate, to what it has been trained through repetition, through pattern, through the specific history of this particular connection to expect when this person makes contact. And what feels like recognition, like rightness, like the particular relief of hearing from someone who matters, can sometimes be indistinguishable from the response of a system that has simply learned the pattern. This is not a cynical observation, it is an important one, because the difference between genuine connection and conditioned response is not always visible in the moment of the feeling. It becomes visible slowly and sometimes painfully in what happens after, in the pattern that the contact initiates, in where this particular cycle tends to go when it runs its course. Here is the warning, and it is worth hearing without defensiveness, without the immediate impulse to explain why this situation is different, why this person is different, why the pattern that applies to everyone else does not apply here. The person reaching out or about to reach out has a history with you that is not simply a collection of good moments. It is a full history, one that includes the moments of genuine connection and warmth and the specific, irreplaceable quality of what exists between you, yes, but also the other moments, the ones that are harder to hold clearly when contact is imminent and the feeling is high and the pull toward this person is doing what it always does, which is make the complicated seem simpler than it is. Think about those other moments. Not to construct a case, not to arrive at a verdict, but simply to see them clearly in the same resolution. You allow the good ones. The times when something felt off but you explained it away. The times when a boundary you held quietly was tested, crossed, or simply not acknowledged. The times when the pattern of this connection left you feeling less like yourself than you were before the contact, smaller, more confused, less certain of your own perception. These moments are part of the history too, and they are worth the same quality of attention you give to the moments that confirm why this person matters to you. There is a specific dynamic that some connections develop over time, particularly connections with significant emotional charge, with a long history, with the particular texture of something that never quite fully resolved, that is worth naming directly. The cycle of distance and contact. It is one of the most recognizable patterns in emotionally complex relationships, and one of the most difficult to see clearly from the inside. From the outside, it has a very consistent shape. There is a period of connection, sometimes intense, sometimes warm and comfortable, sometimes both, followed by a period of withdrawal. The withdrawal can take many forms: physical distance, emotional unavailability, reduced contact, a cooling of energy that is felt before it is understood. And then when the distance has reached a certain point, when something in the dynamic shifts, contact returns, a text, a call, a message that arrives in a way that feels significant, that lands with more weight than its surface content would seem to warrant, that reactivates everything that the distance had been slowly quieting, and the cycle begins again. For the person on the receiving end of this pattern, the contact when it comes tends to feel like resolution, like the return of something valuable, like confirmation that what they felt during the distance was real, that the connection is still there, that perhaps this time things will be different. And sometimes things are different. People do change, patterns do break. Connections that have cycled through distance and return can, under the right conditions and with the right level of genuine intention from both people, find their way to something more stable and more honest than what existed before. But sometimes the contact is not resolution. Sometimes it is simply the beginning of the next iteration of the same cycle. And the difficulty, the genuinely painful difficulty, is that from inside the moment of contact, when the feeling is high and the relief is real and the pull toward this person is doing everything it always does, these two possibilities can be almost impossible to distinguish. So how do you tell the difference? This is the question that the warning is ultimately pointing toward. Not as a way of generating suspicion or preemptive defense, but as a genuine, practical question that deserves a genuine, practical answer. The first thing worth observing is not what is said in the contact. It is how the contact arrives, the energy of it, the quality of it. Whether it carries the texture of someone who has done some interior work in the space between, who has sat with something, reckoned with something, arrived at something new, or whether it carries the texture of someone who has simply reached the point in the cycle where reaching out felt necessary. These two things feel different, subtly, sometimes, but differently. One has a quality of intention to it, a sense of direction, a clarity that, even if it is not immediately put into words can be felt in the way the contact lands. The other has a quality of impulse, of momentum, of someone moving toward you because the pull became stronger than the resistance, without necessarily having resolved anything about why the resistance existed in the first place. The second thing worth observing is your own response, not the surface response, the relief, the activation, the immediate emotional readjustment that happens when contact comes from someone who carries this kind of weight in your life. The response beneath that, the quieter one, the one that, if you allow enough stillness to hear it, may have something more complicated to say than simply, yes, finally, this is what I wanted. Some people, when they are honest about this quieter response, notice something unexpected, a tiredness beneath the relief, a part of them that is glad this person made contact and simultaneously exhausted by what the contact represents, by the reopening of something that has never quite been allowed to fully settle, by the reactivation of a hoping that has been disappointed before, by the familiar complexity of a situation that never quite arrives at the simplicity it keeps promising. That exhaustion is not a reason to close the door, but it is information, important information about what this pattern has been costing you in the quiet accounting that happens beneath the level of the feeling. Now, here's the part of the warning that requires the most careful attention. Your person, the one whose contact is imminent or already present, is not a villain in this reflection. This is important to understand clearly because warnings have a tendency to cast things in binary terms that rarely capture the actual texture of complex human situations. The people who create these kinds of dynamics in relationships are almost never doing so with full conscious awareness of the impact. They are more often than not moving from their own unresolved interior, their own fears, their own wounds, their own unexamined patterns without the level of self-awareness that would allow them to recognize in real time what they are generating in the person they are moving toward. This does not excuse the impact. The impact is real regardless of the intention, but understanding it changes the quality of how you engage with it. It moves the question from what is wrong with this person to what is unresolved in this dynamic. And that is a significantly more useful question because it has answers that can actually inform how you choose to proceed. The warning is not about this person's character, it is about a pattern. And patterns, unlike character judgments, unlike fixed assessments of who someone is or is not, can change. They can be interrupted, they can be named and examined, and with genuine effort from both people involved, replaced with something that functions differently. But that replacement requires honesty, the kind that is uncomfortable in the short term and liberating in the long term. The kind that names what has been happening without dressing it in the more palatable language of circumstances and bad timing, and everything would be different if only. Before this reflection closes, there is something to leave you with that sits outside the warning itself. You have stayed in this orbit, whatever form that staying has taken, however active or passive, however conscious or simply habitual, because something real is present here. The pull you feel toward this person is not an accident or an error in judgment. It is a response to something genuine, something that exists between you that is worth taking seriously. But taking it seriously means looking at it honestly, the whole of it, not just the parts that justify the staying, and not just the parts that justify the leaving. The entire complicated, textured, often contradictory reality of what this connection actually is, as opposed to what it has the potential to be, or what it was at its best, or what it might become under conditions that have not yet materialized. The contact that is coming, or that has come, is an opportunity. Not necessarily the opportunity it will feel like in the first moments of relief and reactivation, but an opportunity nonetheless to see this person clearly, to see the dynamic clearly, to ask honestly and without defensiveness whether what is being offered in this contact is genuinely different from what has been offered before, and to ask yourself with equal honesty, equal clarity, equal willingness to sit with an uncomfortable answer what you are actually available for, what you have the capacity to receive right now, what your own interior, beneath all the feeling and the history and the pull, is actually telling you about whether this is a door worth opening again, and if so, under what conditions and on whose terms. The warning has been delivered. What you do with it belongs entirely to you. Not because the outcome doesn't matter, it does, but because no reflection, however perceptive, can make this choice on your behalf. It can only illuminate the terrain. The walking careful, honest, with eyes genuinely open is yours to do. And somewhere in you, beneath everything else, you already know which direction feels true.